Hello and welcome. This is going to be a very quick and simple case study on how to make a website load a little bit faster. And for this, we're going to use a website called HealthMap, which is a site that tracks the progression of the coronavirus pandemic. And these are all very common sense guidelines. There's nothing really sophisticated. I don't pretend to be an expert on the topic, but I do know some of the very basic best practices. So this is the website as it was on March 30th of this year, 2020. Today is May 27th. And first of all, it might be obvious, but there is some actual data on why making a website faster is important. This is a single page from a book called Web Performance Optimization. It is, I think it was published probably in 2008. So it's quite old, but it's still very relevant. And one data point here is that when Google moved to a result page that had more results, so switching from a 10 result page to a 30 results page, but that loaded slower, so a little bit worse than twice the time, decreased traffic and ad revenues by 20%, which is quite a large number. Same thing for Google Maps. When the homepage decreased in size from 100 kilobytes to 70, 80, so about the 25, 30% decrease, traffic went up 10% in the first week, an additional 25% in the following 3 weeks. And same thing in Amazon, every 100 milliseconds increase in load time decreased sales by 1%. Even at the time when these companies were a lot smaller than they are now, these are quite large numbers when you think about the overall revenue. So the point here is that even a fairly, what would seem like a very small difference, well, not insignificant, but not that major difference in size and speed, can have some pretty drastic performance and drastic consequences. Okay, so I have this website open. I'm going to go through this a little bit later, but I'm simulating a 4G connection, just so that we would see how this would load on a cell phone on a data plan. And I'm going to hit reload. So we see that the Chrome of the app is loading pretty quickly. The map is here. I can drag the map, but the data is not here yet. There it goes. So it took a few seconds for the data to load. So I'm going to use this tool, which is the developer tools, or some people might call it the inspector. You would get it by hitting Control-Shift-I, or probably on a Mac that would be Command-Option-I. And here, this is what I use to simulate a 4G connection. And I'm disabling the cache just so that we simulate someone who is coming on the website for the first time. So there's a few tabs here. There's Inspector that shows you what is in the document. There's Console. I'm guessing most people have seen this before, but some may not have. And this is the tab that is going to be interesting to us, this Network tab. So let me reload again now. See, it still takes a few seconds for the data to come in. All right. So if I zoom out, you can see here is a timeline of what is happening. This is zoomed out, so you can't see the text, but you can see the green rectangles. And you can see that the last one at the end, which lasts about 6.6 seconds, is by far dominating the whole thing. And the point here is that you really can't do anything interesting with this website until this happens. So it means that as a user, you're sitting in front of this web page, You can drag the map around, but if you don't have any data on it, it's not very useful. So the minimum time to usefulness or time to interactivity of the website is fairly long, 6 or 7 seconds. That's probably a lot more than many people's patience. And they might navigate away by that time. So the idea is to see, draw a line in the sand and see, okay, this is the time when my website is starting to be useful. So in this case, it's really the last event, the last thing that gets loaded. And to see what happens before. And also to see why this thing is so huge. So yeah, in this case, this is really the worst offender. And the solution here is either to reduce the amount of data that you need to load, or, which is probably more realistic, to load the data in smaller increments. But the basic idea is to try and reduce the amount of time that is required before the site can have its minimal amount of use. So here, just trying to debug this a little bit, we can see that, for instance, the first 2 requests that are being made, this Bluebird, these are JavaScript libraries that I'm guessing were just copy-pasted as part of a boilerplate web page. And they provide some interesting functionalities around fetch and promises and JavaScript stuff. But it turns out they were not actually being used. And one thing about scripts is that while the web page is loading these Java, depending on how they specify it in the web page, but they block everything else from loading. So while these 2 things are being downloaded and executed, because everything that follows might depend on what is defined in these scripts, everything else is blocked. So something so early on, even if they're not big, or even if they don't take that much time to execute, it might impact the page load time quite a bit. And then there's so this page uses a mapping API called Mapbox. So this is where this comes from, this JavaScript and this CSS. And then there's a bunch of things here which seem a bit puzzling at first. So you can see all these logos. There are images that seem to be for universities, but they don't seem to be appearing in the website, in the web page here. It turns out that these are actually part of a credits or about page that is not shown at first. So we are spending a bunch of time downloading these, even though we're not really using them right away. So that's something we can improve as well. And even the images themselves, they can be, so for instance, this one, let's see, this is a Oxford logo. I'm going to open this in a new tab. So this is an image. Let's see, I can save this image maybe here. And there's a bunch of different techniques to reduce the payload of these, the size of these images. And it might seem minor, but again, just pointing back to the initial article here, even small differences multiplied by a certain number of users can have a very big impact on speed, but also on bandwidth. So let's see, I've downloaded this Oxford image, and it's about 22K. So it's a PNG, or some people say PNG image. There's there's a tool called OptiPNG, which is probably easy to get on most Linux distributions. I'm not sure how to get it on Windows. It's probably not very difficult. Let's see, OptiPNG Windows. You can probably download this as a Windows installer as well. But what it does is it analyzes a PNG image and tries to strip away anything that is not necessary. So in this case, we have a 25% decrease just by running this tool, right? So now instead of 22K, this image is 17K. And if we do this for all these images, that would probably help a bit. So that's one thing. Now let's switch to the actual worst offender here. This is a large JSON file that contains everything, and I'm going to switch to the current version of this website. You can see it's a different browser window, which is green instead of red. So let's see. I'm gonna use regular 4G for this one as well and reload. And you can see the data is showing up a lot faster. And I'm going to switch back and forth between the red version, which is this version from March, and the newer version, which is in green. And this one is from today, May 27th. And so one of the main reasons why there's so much data is that we have this timeline here. And because this data file was growing so much and took longer and longer to download, instead of having, we had this data per day, and because it was too much data, they had to strip it down per week. So here we have a timeline, and you can see what happens over time, how the disease is spreading. And each increment is a single week, because having every single day in this whole thing was just too much data to download. And in this case, we're able to have a daily level of granularity again. And the main way that we did this is by slicing this file into individual components. So the idea is that as soon as you download the first one, which is the data for today, this makes the website already usable. So even when this timeline is set to the latest data that we have, I can already look at it and inspect what's going on here. And the idea is to dynamically, or maybe lazily, let's say, download everything else in the background. So let me reload the page just to show what's happening here. I maybe unzoom a bit. Okay, so already this is already showing up, but now you can see, again, I'm simulating a slow connection here. So you can see the data coming in as we go, and we're updating this timeline dynamically, just providing a larger and larger interval of time as we get more data. But again, the basic idea here is to reduce the amount of time that is needed for people to wait before the website is at least minimally usable. And you can see the data is still coming in here. And this is all still very slow. It would be a lot faster if I used the full bandwidth of the connection that I have. But this simulates what people would see on a reasonably fast mobile connection. So, and what about these images that were not being used? So the easy fix for that is to just delay those. You just basic principle is to delay everything that you don't need right away to show the very first usable state of the website. So in this case, what happens is that these images show when I click on this link here, about. I'm going to clear this just to show what's happening. And now if I click on about, now these are being downloaded, and these are the images that are being used, university logos. And notice that this is the first time they are being loaded. They were not being downloaded before. And so they were not cluttering the download time at first. So the way this is done here, it's quite simple. Instead of what it used to be is that this is the index.html, so it's the main page on this website. And all of this this markup here, this text and the images were just part of this page inline. And instead of that, what we can do is we have this link here called About, and we have this onClick event handler, and this calls a JavaScript function, which in turn, now I'm switching to the other side here, is just fetching this bunch of HTML from the server. And then once that's done, it shows it, which in turn triggers the downloading of these images. So long story short, the basic principle is really to, I'm going to repeat myself quite a bit, but just to make sure that you download to the browser only the very minimal number of things that is needed to render the initial page and to make it usable. Some websites even do use some tricks, like I think Facebook does this, or maybe YouTube, where they have some sort of placeholders showing just with very simple HTML what the page is going to look like once it's loaded, but just having some frames and placeholders so that people think that it's already coming, even though it's not really usable yet. But it's the same basic idea, to try and reduce the perceived latency and the perceived time between the navigation event loading the page and actually being presented with something useful. All right, that's all for this very simple overview. I hope this was useful. You don't need to subscribe or like the video if this taught you something. Then I'm happy. And see you in the next one. Thanks.